Hey everybody, welcome to the GMG review. Today we're taking a look at the Heart of Ghur, the new 2-player starter set for Warcry 2nd edition. Yes, this is a new edition of Warhammer Age of Sigmar Warcry, and is a reimagining, revamping of a familiar core rule set to include a much more detailed sort of post-game and what you play for section. A bit of a further division between the 3 ways to play. So it's 2 books in this box, and you'll notice this format kind of mirrors what they're doing with Kill Team. You have a big core rulebook that has the core rules of the game, and then you have individual warband books that basically bring you a highlight of 2 kind of opposed warbands. In this case, the Horns of Hashut and the Nurgle worshipping Rotmire Creed with their beautiful new minis that come in the box set and all the new terrain. So, we're going to jump into both these books, but I'm going to start off with a greatest hits of what's new in this core rulebook. Now, if you haven't played Warcry before, there will be a Let's Play coming in the next couple weeks. We are thick in the Horus Heresy campaign right now, and as I'm taking time off over the summer, I wasn't able to get games in yet with the Warcry box set, but I'm going to be jumping in and we're going to do one of the quest arcs, 3-game narrative arc, which I think showcases actually what's different a little bit better going forward in August, so you'll see it pretty soon. It just showed up before I left for vacation, and I didn't have a chance to actually get any games in, so those will be coming up in August. So I'm going to dive through the core rulebook and talk about what's different here. The basic core structure of the game is relatively unchanged. We have a 160-ish page rulebook in full color here. It does basically change the setting of the game. That's one of the big key features. We're going to Ghur, which is where most of the action right now in Age of Sigmar is located, the big sort of like wilderness beastlands. And that is cool because it pulls the focus away from the Varanspire and the 8 points and makes it a little less chaos-centric. I feel like the game was very chaos-oriented in the beginning, and that might have actually kind of... You could play as any faction, but you could play as any faction after the launch of the game, and I feel like there was a bit of like a, well, I like Age of Sigmar, but I don't play Chaos, so I don't know if this is for me kind of a thing that maybe put up like an invisible mental barrier to the game when it first launched. Because it was 8 different bad guy factions, basically. There wasn't really a lot of cool protagonists to root for. When it's like one of the warbands is the guys who cut their own faces off, right? Should I be the guys who cut their faces off, or should I be the people, you know, that like live with animals? Or maybe I'll be the people that all like have really pale skin and never take their masks off. Or maybe I'll be the people that are clearly just high on drugs, or the bird people. Maybe I'll be the bird people. Like there wasn't really like a good guy faction per se. And so Ghur kind of opens it up to other factions and a sort of wider story because you're not trapped in a chaos controlled area anymore, and it makes a bit more sense that all the other factions are now present. So we've got the sort of feature here, of course, being on the 2 new ones, although you can see the new Chaos Legionnaires, which are amazing. The miniatures of the Chaos Legionnaires are probably my favorite Warcry miniatures ever. They are so dark. I love them. And it, you know, highlights all that sort of key like build, paint, play stuff. So here we are in Ghur, fighting and fighting, talking about the endless battles and the Ear of the Beast. And let's keep going and where we're going to be at. So the Gnarlwood, it's a huge forest stretching across the plains of Ghur, and this is kind of the Mordheim where this takes place. There's different chaos powers controlling different areas, like the Bloodman Ravage is controlled by Khorne, the Tainted Wound is kind of undivided. Over here you've got the Skinsloth Fen, the swamps that are controlled by Nurgle, and then the Weird Lights, which is sort of where there's like weird swamp gas and stuff like that, which is controlled by Tzeentch. There are other factions around, right? So like there's the mountains where Kragnos was imprisoned. But like the Spinecrawler webs where the Spiderkin are, the Great Stinkhorn where the goblins are, Camp Fortune, which is where the Seeds of Sigmar have gone, the Eater Pits, which is where the ogres have landed, and Count Moltaire's Blood Hunt, where the vampires are. Over here, the Stormcast in Slayer's Cliff. So sort of there are enclaves of all the factions around, and this giant forest represents sort of a big killing field inside of Ghur where they all meet and fight. And of course, there's vaults. And that's what everyone's looking for. There's got to be a MacGuffin, and the MacGuffin for this one is you're looking for a crashed Seraphon spaceship, because Yep, temple ships were a thing. They crashed here somehow because, you know, at some point during the unmaking of the old world, the Seraphon just get on their spaceships and leave. They're like, well, this one didn't work out. Let's try a new one. And one of their ships has crashed there, and it's full of crazy relics that everyone's looking for to try and win the war. All right, so the Agents of Chaos obviously are sent to go do it, and it gives you an overview of all the different factions. Oh my god, the Centurion ally is so cool. All the Chaos factions can use him. Look at how cool he is. The Centaurian, sorry, not Centurion. He's a Taurian. It's such a cool miniature. And a color section on all of those. The Sentinels Warrior. You got basically the first, oh geez, where are we at now? The first 50 pages or so are just setting the scene and showing you color pictures of like all of the cool factions that you could play in here. And that's where you can see that it really does open up. It's not just a Chaos-centric game. They've spent a bunch of time talking about why every faction is here and what they're doing in the area, so that no matter what your collection of Citadel miniatures that you're excited about, you can go and play. And that to me right there kind of opens the door. I'm surprised they put 2 Chaos factions in the box because of that. I feel like they would have maybe put in someone who is not Chaos-oriented as the opposing force, but you know, we are where we are. They're cool new miniatures too, but you can basically play with whatever you like. All right, core rules. These are not different really, except for a few keynotes. You can see I post-it noted this whole thing to mark out where things have changed a bit. What the core rules have basically moved to is they've added all the errata from the various Tome of Champions that came out for the previous incarnation of Warcry, and then massively expanded the narrative play section for the game. So I'm going to pick out the key features. If you haven't played Warcry before, it is a skirmish game. You're going to be playing with between probably 3 and 15 models. 3 if you're playing like a huge model army, like something like Ogres or Stormcast, where your guys are 20 to 25 wounds each and just big giant killing machines. But the game can, which is actually cool, because you could play Stormcast with one of the Start Collecting Stormcast boxes. Almost all of them would play. I'm pretty sure you can. So any like a box of Ogre Iron Guts would basically be, which you could also build as like bulls, would also be enough for you to play like an Ogre warband. And then you're going to be playing individual like 1,000-point-ish games. It does use a point draw system, kind of like Kill Team, except instead of picking model by model, you're just picking based on point values. Playing a game, and then depending on the style of game you're playing, you're either earning glory if you're playing open play, you're earning you know, your objective points if you're playing in a match play tournament style game, or you're learning renown and glory if you're playing in a narrative game and completing quests to find magical items and learn new skills and stuff like that. Which is a big difference, but I'll highlight that later. And then it is an action-oriented game. The biggest kind of like, I would say, feature of Warcry, if you've never played it before, would be the deck-driven scenario game. A lot of the missions, unless you're playing match play, if you're playing open play, there's like a random sort of like game generator that shows you your terrain, your deployment, your victory deck, and your twist deck, so like how to deploy everything. And that is a nice sort of like feature where you're not playing the same game more than once. The match play games are all about symmetry though, so you kind of do away with those and you play more balanced and sort of like generally symmetrical games. The big sort of like shift, I guess, would be there is a wave system. It plays on a small table, so you don't necessarily get your whole warband at the beginning. You start with a dagger, a hammer, and an anvil. No, sword. A dagger, a hammer, and a sword. And they might show up at different times and deploy in different areas of the map. So it has a fairly unique deployment system, too. When you fight the game, it uses an interesting initiative system where you roll a pool of 6 dice. Any individual dice rolls that aren't paired, like they don't have any doubles in the dice roll, become singles, and that's who the person that gets the most of those goes first. But all of your doubles, triples actually power up your abilities board, where you can activate sort of like super actions that can be done by your warband over the course of the turn. And you do get a wild die as well to try and modify what you end up rolling randomly in that pool to be able to get off those super actions, or to go first if you want as well. So the initiative is an interesting mechanic and fairly unique to Games Workshop games, and remained in here. Now there's only 4 actions in the entire game: move, attack, disengage, or wait. Those are the core things. Move can encompass lots of things though, like jumping and climbing. Attack is both ranged and melee, just depending on how far away you are. Wait allows you to reserve an action to use later on, and of course disengage just means you fall back. And the first of the new things, okay. Well, actually, two new things. So the first thing is that core universal abilities have been ratified to include all of the updates that were in the sort of generals, was it the FAQs and the Tome of Champions. And the main one is Onslaught. Onslaught used to be able to just buy an additional attack. It was incredibly powerful with long range stuff. I think everybody who played Stormcast had a long strike crossbow that would just onslaught to do an insane amount of damage. They eventually changed it to you can only onslaught with things that are range 3 or less, which means melee attacks. They've actually, and those are now defined in the rules. Anything that's 3 or less is ranged. Anything that's 3 or like more than 3 to its maximum range is considered, sorry, anything that's less than 3 is considered melee. Anything that's more than 3 and inside its maximum range is considered to be a ranged attack. That's like defined in actually the attack rules now. But even Onslaught just says, add one of the attack characteristics of melee attack actions made by this fighter until it ends, until their activation ends. So for a double now, you can't be double tapping long strike crossbows across the table and just blowing people's heads off before they get to do anything. So that's not necessarily new, but into the core rules now, which is nice. They've updated the core rules with all the stuff that was basically learned across the first edition of Warcry. And then reactions are the new thing. Now, a reaction is basically a thing that can be done by any model when it's targeted by an attack, if it hasn't activated yet or it's waiting. Or if it's in a campaign game and it's more than level 0. If it has a level of renown, it can actually spend a renown level to react over the course of the turn. It means your more experienced fighters can basically fight back and do things during the course of the activation. And there's 3 universal reactions. You can have other reactions based on your faction, though, that you can gain access to. But these are the 3 that everybody can do. You can counter, which means that for every 1 your opponent rolls when they attack you, they take 2 points of damage, which is cool. Basically make them pay for their 1s. You can take cover if someone shoots at you, which means that every time they roll a critical hit, you get to roll a die, and a 4+ becomes a normal hit instead. That can be huge because ranged weapons can vary really highly between their critical damage and their basic damage. They could be like 2-7, you know what I mean? So dropping a 7 point of damage down to a 2 point of damage, cover can be enormous. Or you can strike them down, which is where if they fall back from you, if they make a like a break off move, then on a 4+ they take D6 points of damage. So reactions are neat, but they have a penalty, which is you either spend that point of renown, which means that you can over the course of the turn only make a number of reactions equal to your renown level. So you could, if you're in a starting narrative warband, usually your leader is the only person with 1 level of renown. They basically get 1 free reaction per turn. If you're not, though, you get 1 less action when you activate, because this can only be done by unactivated fighters. They get a -1 action token, which means they've reacted this turn and they're not going to be able to react later. But they could react again, which means they would basically have 0 actions when they later activate. So it does mean that what I like about that is if you get dogpiled and you know your fighter's going to die, you just react twice. So if you have a little fighter that's surrounded by like 3 or 4 other fighters, you know they're going to get like beaten down in the course of the turn. Just sit there, don't even activate them, just make them counter and counter and counter and get through their damage. Because they might actually be better at countering than they would be if they were just hitting with their bare hands. So it's kind of a handy mechanic for your like bait and switch models and stuff too. So I like that. It gives you something to do during your opponent's activation. Although this is an alternating activation game, you're going back and forth during the combat phase activating models. So you're never waiting very long, but it's just an additional level of engagement and decision making over the course of the game. Obviously I haven't gotten to play with it yet, but I'm excited that it exists because I like being able to make choices, even if I'm not the one rolling dice, that can affect the outcomes. And then terrain. They've done a bit more to define terrain in here. Things like unscalable terrain, like you can't climb a brazier or a tree branch with foliage. They've actually defined stairs and ladders. They define deadly terrain, archways and doorways as well, which means that things with certain keywords, for instance, can't go through doors. So like your monsters in your mount can't run through a tiny door to get through a wall. Typically, terrain is hard in Warcry, which is to say that you can't move through it. If you're going to try and interact with terrain, you're measuring full distances. And for a very dialed into like 10 or like, 5 to 10 models type of game, I like that. I like there being very specific interactions with terrain. I'm fine with 40k where infantry can just walk through walls because it's abstracted, right? 40k is a very like abstracted style game where you're playing with massive amounts of guys fighting massive amounts of guys. In a game like this, I want the terrain to be like, I want a door to be a door. I want a spiked wall to be a spiked wall and to be dangerous. Spend a little bit more time making it matter because I'm spending a bit more time painting it. Objectives and treasure tokens, these are basically the same as before, and how you interact with them. And they've added in now the allies, thralls, and monsters stuff. Now, you typically won't get to use this stuff in campaigns, but in open play and actually in match play, you can use as much as you want. Allies, for instance, you can take 2 people with the hero key mark or the ally key mark, as long as they're from the same Grand Alliance as you, and mix them in, which I like. You can mix and match your factions a bit more. It means if you really want to have that Cities of Sigmar army that has a random Stormcast hero leading it, you can. They can't necessarily be your leader, but they can be a hero that's fighting alongside the army, and it makes for a bit more variety in your model collection. One of the cool things about warband style games like this is you get to paint your favorite miniatures from a miniature range, and anything that opens that door a little bit, I'll be honest, this game is probably one of the simpler sort of like gladiatorial mosh pit style skirmish games. Let me use the miniatures I want, right? Because everything's been given a stat card. I can't alter the miniatures themselves. Let me cherry pick different cool ones that I want to paint instead, and let me play with the composition if I can't play with the models. And when I play with the models, I mean like equip them differently or whatever. Although, because of the way the stat lines work in this game, you could convert all your miniatures cosmetically, and it doesn't really matter as long as you know what they are generally. You gain additional monster hunting abilities because we are fighting in Ghur, which is neat, where you can do you can stab them in the eyes on triples, taunt them, or like try and tie them up with ropes, and then the monsters get monsters like rampages they can do. So they can do monstrous reach until the end of the activation. Don't count the vertical distance when measuring attacks, because normally you measure everything base to base. So you have to measure up a wall to fight. If a monster is super big, it just reaches up there and fights you. It doesn't care. It doesn't care where its base is. Drag people around and maul them. You can move enemy fighters. Demolishing rampage, track terrain features and stuff like that. All right, and then 2 giant pages of rune marks. I noted this out because this does add in all the new rune marks that you can have, and also shows off things like the battle plan card rule marks. There are a lot of rune marks. They've doubled down on the pictographic stuff. I don't necessarily think it was necessary, especially if you're not going to be printing cards as much anymore, which you'll see soon looking at the Rotten Ruin. But yeah, the first choice. Open play rules, make a team, play a game, use all the cards. They give you stuff for Coalitions of Might, which is kind of a random open play battle plan, a camp raid. And then Rules of Triumph and Treachery, which is 4-player games. So Lord of the Tower, there can be only 1. And then match play games. Now what's cool is there are full tournament rules in here. So if you're a fan of playing tournaments and you want to run one for something like Warcry, or basically just want to run a Age of Sigmar skirmish tournament, which is kind of what Warcry is now, there's a full set for doing that. It has 6 different missions, which are predetermined, so instead of using the cards, you have your deployment layout already, you have your victory condition, and the only things you do deal out, I think, are the cards for terrain. Yeah, draw a terrain card, and that's it, no twist. So you just draw your terrain placement, and that's all. And what you'd probably do, I think, in the 6, the No Quarter, Reaper, the Hidden Vault, and Ley Lines. Running a tournament, I think it's the TO that draws the terrain card for everybody. Or you just put the terrain deck down, that's the terrain deck for the terrain that's on that board. But yeah, scoring for tournaments, tournament quests, where you can play quests over the course of the tournament. I like that. It's optional, but basically you can have quests at the end of the battle. You complete a quest if X or Y, and there's 6 different quests for the tournament. During the tournament, each player must secretly pick 1 tournament quest at the start of the initiative phase of the first battle round. Each player must record their quest. When completing their quest, a player cannot choose the same quest twice during a tournament. So basically you can pick the 6 quests once each over the course of the tournament, and you complete it otherwise. A player that completes their quest, I think they get an extra victory point. Oh, it's a tiebreaker. There you go. It's the quest for additional tiebreak. So the person that completes the most quests, another tiebreak, if you have the same number of victory points at the end of the tournament. All right, narrative play. All right, so this is the big part right here. This is the part that is the most different. I am on the record for my initial reviews of Warcry back in, geez, when did I do that? 2017, 2018? I actually don't remember when the Warcry originally came out. I think it was 2018. That one of the things that I was, I think, disappointed by, I'll be honest, I was disappointed, was that I didn't feel like I had a reason to play multiple games in Warcry in the first edition, and the narrative content felt kind of disposable. Like, you'd play through these like 1, 2, 3 campaign arcs, but you had to have someone play through all of them with you, and there wasn't a lot of point in your opponent playing in the campaign arc if they didn't get anything at its conclusion. There's no point in them actually doing it. they had to be playing their own, and so you had to trade back and like if they're on their own quest and you're on your own quest, every game doesn't mean something for you. It's only every other game because you want to play one on your friends and one on yours, going back and forth to try and complete them. And the only thing you really earned was these disposable lesser artifacts that would evaporate sometimes if you didn't use them right away, and destiny points, which is rerolls. And even the billing for Warcry in like the boilerplate for it at the beginning of the book said like, you'll find new weapons and your guys will learn skills and abilities and this and that. And it was all kind of just boiled into this like reroll mechanic with Destiny. And it didn't give us a lot of reason to replay it. We got excited about Warcry probably whenever there was a new mechanic. So like the Catacombs game was new and mechanically different. So we got excited and painted up new warbands. And when new miniatures came out that we wanted to play, we got into it. But I was never invested in the individual warbands. I never gave my leader a name. There was never a story, you know what I mean? Like there was never like a reason to like do it sort of in a way that I felt compelled to like be attached to these people that were going on these little mini quests. That has been clearly heard by Games Workshop. And I don't think it was just me. I think that was kind of a general consensus of Warcry. It was a really competent sort of like arena skirmish game, but it wasn't necessarily the campaign game that I think we thought it was going to be, because from the outside in the packaging, it looked like it was going to be Mordheim. And Mordheim was this rich narrative experience, whereas this was more of a skirmish game. And it was horses for courses. It wasn't the game's fault. It was my expectation I unfairly placed on the box game that made me disappointed that there wasn't more for me to do campaign-wise. So they have expanded the narrative play section to be fully a third of the book. So the rest of this book now is the narrative section of the game. So, and I'm very appreciative of that. It's not just 5 pages of you can earn rerolls if you live through a game. So what do you need to do to play a narrative game? And this is going to be probably the rest of the part of this review. Well, the most important thing is you're going to build your leader, you're going to pick his heroic trait, and then you're going to build a warband around him. You are camped outside the Gnarlwood. What's cool is you are narratively placed in this location now. It's not just like to say you're playing in the Varanspire. No, you have a camp in the Gnarlwood, and it gives you benefits, and it has like sort of like liabilities as well. So you mark down the fact that you are living on the Gnarlwood outskirts. You pick someone with the leader rune mark. You only get one, so no allies, right? Because they all have the leader rune mark too. They all have the hero one. Although there might be some that don't have the leader key mark. There could just, or even the ally keyword. So you could probably actually use the allies from the same Grand Alliance. You just wouldn't be able to use any that have the additional leader keyword, because you get one and only one leader. And it has to be a total of 1,000 points for your warband. At least 3 fighters, no more than 15. And everybody has to have the same faction rune mark. Allies, thralls, and monsters cannot be added at this stage, sorry, but they cannot be added later on. There you go, it actually calls out that you can't use allies initially. Your leader gets 1 level of renown, which means he can make 1 free reaction per turn, and picks a heroic trait. And now heroic traits are basically, you boil together skills and you boil together stat increases into one sort of pool. There's 6 universal ones, but there's more that you can get later on. And that is Ferocious Combatant, add to one of their attacks, one of their melee attacks. Agile Warrior, plus 1 of their move. Hardy Constitution. Every time the fighter activates, remove D3 damage points allocated to them, including when they're activated for a second time after waiting. So that means that if you wait, you heal D3, and then wait again. So basically, if you take a rest, you heal 2d3 per round. Hardy Constitution is going to be, I think, the fan favorite. Resourceful, if this fighter is included, you get an additional wild die. Thick-skinned, each time an attack scores any critical hits, one of them becomes a regular hit instead. That I think will be the second most popular. And then Skilled Commander, once per battle, this fighter can use Inspiring Presence without needing to use any ability dice. So basically you can activate you can double activate an additional model once per game without having to use the dice to do it. So now your warband's created. You mark down that you are on the outskirts, and you choose a quest. Now there is a universal quest everyone can go on, and quests don't require you to play any specific special mission. They are things that you're always on the lookout for while you're in the Gnarlwood. So like, imagine it's like the Lord of the Rings, right? And Aragorn's been tasked with returning like the ring to Mordor, basically, and throwing it into Mount Doom. Well, along the way, he has to rescue Merry and Pippin. Then he has to defend, whatchamacallit, he has to defend Isengard from the Uruk-hai. Then he has to go and stop the armies from destroying Gondor. Then he has to go and buy time for Frodo to destroy the ring by assaulting the gates of Mordor. And like, that guy's on a quest the whole time. He's just doing all these little things in between doing it and not doing it. And that's the idea behind the quest in this campaign. There's a universal one, which is one anybody can do anytime. It's just treasure in the Gnarlwoods. You're just looking for treasure while you're out in the woods. And it's done during the Aftermath sequence. You send people that haven't been taken out over the course of the game to go and explore and go on quests. So there are also universal quests for Chaos, Order, Death, and Destruction, and you can have more quests based on your warband type, which we'll look at when we look at Rotten Ruin. And then finishing touches, you can have your encampment location and state, which, like I said, the outskirts is where you all start, and it's always secure. What's cool is you don't have to roll for the encampment to not become secure in the outskirts. And we'll talk more about that later on too. Your warband's glory, which is your currency for buying stuff, and your reputation, which is basically your notoriety. It always starts at 2, and it can go up and down playing campaign battles. So a bit like the rep in Necromunda. All right, you fight a game. When picking your warband, all the fighters are drawn from your roster. You must include your leader if they can. The point limit is determined by where you are in your encampment. So you can actually become more powerful based on where your encampment is. And after the battle, each player has to complete their Aftermath sequence. Now, if your rep is lower than your opponent's, if it's 5 or more different, you get 2 extra wild dice. And if it's 10 or more, you get 3 wild dice instead. You can also run away in this. Now, that wasn't actually an option in regular Warcry, but as long as half your fighters are dead, they give you the Mordheim-esque option to just flee. All your guys count as being dead for the purpose of going and doing exploration stuff later on, but they don't make injury rolls. So if it's going really bad, you can take off. Certainly, they count as being taken out for the purpose of victory, but you still get to go make exploration rolls and stuff like that because you run away. All right, and this is the biggest difference now. So you basically just play and generate a game based on what the missions you want to do are. So like if you want to do a campaign arc, there's going to be specific missions, or you can just randomly generate a mission using the decks. So you can do it either way. You can have a progressively generated, like I'm just going and exploring the Gnarlwood and I find another warband and we procedurally generate a mission to play, or we can go on a campaign quest, in which case they're sort of dealt out for you. I love that. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the actual campaign narrative arcs. So you win the game, you get glory. You can spend this stuff later on to get guys. And you gain a rep as well, so that you also suffer injuries. Now, it used to just be like a very simple D6 roll. There is a full D6, like 66 classic GW injury table now. It has the usual stuff. 41 through 65, you're a flesh wound, you're totally fine. 66, you gain a level, you survive against the odds. And then you have everything from you're dead on a 1 to 3, a gut wound, you get half your wounds rounding up while you have this injury. So you just totally have your wounds. Cracked rib, which means you can -1 toughness, blind to 1 eye, -1 attacks for range attacks, for all attacks. Fractured arm, -1 strength for melee attacks. Broken leg, -1 move. Concussion, -1 from the value of abilities that you have. Lost renown, you lose a level of renown, but no other effects. Now, even though you see these have the injury keyword, so like fractured arm, blind to 1 eye, cracked rib, gut wound, and broken leg, and concussion, they can go away. At the end of every game, you roll for all the injuries to see if they basically fade off. And there can be bonuses and that too later on. Then you earn renown. Again, that's based on how you did. So in this step, you make a renown roll for each fighter that was in the game that wasn't taken into action. On a 6, they gain a level of renown. And you can pick one fighter, on a 6, any fighter that was in the warband learns a lesson and can go up in renown. You add 1 if they didn't go to action, so on a 5+, you gain a level and go up in renown. And remember, renown is used for additional things like your reactions. Make 2 if you want to mark on someone for glory or at the end of the game. So if you have like a particular favorite model you want to have do it, you make 2 rolls for them and pick the highest. Actually, you just make 2 rolls, sorry. They could both go up. So you could gain 2 levels of renown if you get 2 5+. You get a maximum of 3 levels of renown, and her hero's renown and traits. Fighters with the hero rune mark get additional benefits from having renown. So normally the renown for your regular fighters is just going to give them the ability to make extra reactions, but people with the hero rune mark can also earn a heroic trait. And they do that immediately, which is why you're capped at 3. And then you can further your quest. So you go to your quest log and you see, what do I need to do? So for instance, if I was doing the search for treasure, while embarked on this quest in step 5 of the Aftermath sequence, you can pick 3 fighters from your warband and send them forth to search for the artifact. To do so, roll a dice for each fighter in your warband, adding 1 to each roll if you won the last campaign battle. Then add the rolls together, and this is your progress. Keep a record of your progress in your quest log. In addition, if you make an unmodified roll of 1, the fighter is attacked by something within the gnarlwood, make an injury roll for the fighter. So whoever you send out, it's maybe not safe, right? You're going out into a dangerous place. Once your progress is 10 or more, you complete this quest, your warband's discovered an artifact, roll for the treasures in the gnarlwood table, and see what you find. If the result of your roll is an artifact that a fighter in your warband already has, roll again until you find one you didn't find. So for instance, for the quest in the gnarlwood, the universal quest, which is right here, treasures of the gnarlwood, you could find like a jade ring, so you add 3 to the wound characteristic of the bear. And once per battle, the bear can use this artifact as a bonus action or remove D3 damage or D6 damage points. A cursed blade, warding glyphstone, a serpent tongue scepter, like all kinds of different abilities basically and artifacts you can find. So if you manage to send 3 people to go do it, then you could almost immediately probably find an artifact and add to your warband. Someone can carry it. And then you can also give up on a quest. If you think you can't do it because you lost too many guys or you just want to start a new one, you can just drop it. When you find artifacts, though, there's 2 types. There's lesser and major ones. Someone has to be the bearer of each artifact, though, so if they die, it is lost. Now, lesser ones can be found later on, and they will, of course, give you bonus powers and stuff, too. And in step 5, you send the fighters forth. Like I said, for the quest, this is where you can also send them forth if you're not on a quest or you just want to send one forth to go and explore. So one fighter, regardless of who you send on a quest, can also just go explore the gnarlwood for whatever reason. And they roll a D66 roll. Now, when they explore the gnarlwood, what they're looking for isn't just artifacts, although they could find one. They also might find you a new place to live. And those new places to live come with different bonuses. And the higher you roll, the better it is. So for instance, the Shard of Talaxis, your warrior returns with news most fortuitous. Deep within the gnarlwood, they discover a fragment of ruined Talaxis, which is the ship. Take whatever treasures are held there for your own. You can go and encamp on it, but you have to spend 20 glory to get there. So even if you find a cool place to live, you need to have the glory set aside. So how much glory you earn in a game? Well, if you won, you're going to get 5. So if you played a campaign battle and won, you're going to get 5. And then if you kill the opponent's leader, it could be 6. And if half or more of the fighters in your opponent's warband take them out, it could be 7. So you're not moving camps in the first game, right? In fact, if you find the Shard of Talaxis, it's going to be at least 3 games with maximum results before you can move there. And you're spending glory on nothing else. It's usually 10 to move, but the Wellspring, the Leyline Nexus, the Hidden Cavern, the Scorpion Hive, the Time-Worn Ruins, they're all 15 or more. So 15 to 20 to move into. So they're really cool locations. It's going to take you a while in the campaign to do so. But they all have bonuses. If you don't move in, you can still do stuff though. You can roll a die. Usually on a 1 to 3, you don't find anything, but on a 4 to 6, you might find lesser artifacts. So even though you don't find major artifacts, you might find cool lesser ones. And they can be all kinds of stuff. A blood beetle, for instance, it's consumable, and it gives you +1 to your melee actions until the end of your activation as a free action. That's something else worth noting. They've made all of like the potion chugs in this free actions. So you don't have to worry about burning actions before. In the previous incarnation of Warcry, it was changed in the Tome of Champions. You had to spend an action to do it, and it made most of the lesser artifacts not really worth taking. They did notice that things are perishable. So if it has the perishable keyword, then after every game you have to roll a die. On a 4+, it's still good, but on a 1 to 3, it goes away. So some of your items might not last. That's why they're lesser artifacts. And then you get a little map for all your encampments. You start here on the outskirts of the gnarlwood, and you might end up in like the Shard of Talaxis over here, the crashed ship. Now, as you see, each of the locations has a bonus. So for instance, the outskirts of the gnarlwood, your point limit for your warband is 1,000. You get no bonus to your rep for being there, but you don't make encampment checks, because at the end of every game, you have to roll a die, and on your encampment state, on a 1 to, basically like the starting thing is secured, but if it becomes compromised, then you're basically a level away from it being, not compromised, threatened is the level away, but compromised is the 3rd state it can be in. When you're compromised, you lose all its bonuses, although you gain your rep bonus, and your point limit for the game is reduced to 950. So as you go higher, you see it goes to 1050, 1050, 1150, 1100, 1150, 1250, 1150, 1150, and 1200. So if you live in the Hidden Cavern, you get, in a campaign battle, you start additional wild die at the start of the battle if you're the defender, and you can bring 1,250 points worth of guys to every game. and you get +2 to your rep. Whereas if you're on the Sharded Talaxis, in step 5, you can pick a fighter to explore the wreckage, and if you do so on a 1, you make an injury roll. On a 2+, you gain a Gnarlwood Lesser Artifact. And you, instead of rolling a d66, roll 1 dice and add 60 to the score. So you always get the high stuff from the exploration, and you're +3 to your rep. So it's neat because where you live actually matters a whole bunch for how big of your warband size you get to bring. And also all these cool bonus unlocks. So you're chasing your quest to try and find cool items. You're trying to earn renown by playing lots of games, and you're also trying to get to a cooler encampment. But of course, at the end of the game, you have to figure out what the managing your warband stuff's going to be, or sorry, the encampment check, which means your warband could become threatened and then not secure. In manage your warband, you can make your recovery rolls. So first you roll for your perishable stuff. First you roll for your recovery rolls. Roll for every injury in your warband. On a 4+, it's healed, and they no longer have it, unless they gained it that same game. Yeah, except for injuries that are in the aftermath sequence. If you just gotten it, you can't get rid of it. Then a perishable roll. On a 4+, it's fine. Otherwise, on 1 to 3, it's gone. And then add and remove fighters. So you can kick out people that are too injured, and you can add new fighters as well. And it costs you, based on what their point value is, a number of glory to bring them in. So again, you're managing recruiting fighters out of your glory and also saving it up to move encampments into someplace cooler. So, you know, real estate's expensive these days. You gotta put down a down payment. And yeah, so at 50 points, it's gonna cost you 1 glory. 51 to 100 is 2. So the average warband fighter is gonna cost you probably 3 glory if they're between 100 and 150. The big spendy guys like Stormcast and stuff, you could be up to like 4 or 5 or 6 if you want to hire like a monster. And then you can have up to 20 fighters on your roster. Heroes and allies, total of 3, which you could hire at this point. And monsters is going to be 1. So you can have big things in your warband, and your total roster is going to be a grand total of 24 models. Oh no, sorry, it's 20 models, of which 3 could be heroes and allies, and 1 can be a monster. That's what it is. Total fighters is still 20. But you're drawing from that pool for your individual games. Then you recalculate your rep. Once you've completed all subsequence, you recalculate your rep. It's +1 for everybody with the hero rune mark, +1 for each heroic trait you have, +1 for every artifact you have, +1 if you have any monsters, and plus X according to the rep modifier for your location. So the cooler location, the bigger your rep is. And that's your balancing factor because you're giving out more wild dice if your rep is really high. And then make an encampment check. You roll 2 dice, don't add the scores together, and check if either or both of the scores is a 1. A 1's a fail. Each roll of 1 is a fail. The first time you make a fail, it goes from secure to threatened. The second time you roll, it becomes threatened to compromise. So if you roll snake eyes, you can get kicked out of the place the same time you move in and still spend the 20 glory. So nowhere safe in the Gnarlwood, and you can find yourself kicked from encampment to encampment as you go along. But basically, as long as both dice are 2+, you get to stay there as long as you like. And then relocate with haste. So when you become compromised, the location bonus for your warband no longer applies, but you still get your rep mod. Your point limit for the warband for the next campaign battle is 950, and you don't make encampment checks. So it basically becomes a worse outskirts. And then relocating with haste. Once your warband's encampment is compromised, finding a new location is a priority. For this reason, when your encampment becomes compromised, you can choose your warband to immediately give up their current quest and instead embark upon Explore the Gnarlwood, which is 117. And that's the basic one. All right, so we're on to the universal quests, and they're basically divided up by everybody can do them, and then your Grand Alliance can do them. So you Treasure the Gnarlwood. You can also do, there it is, Explore the Gnarlwood, Ascension to Glory. So Ascension to Glory is kind of, so Treasure the Gnarlwood is find artifacts. Ascension to Glory is you can gain universal heroic traits. So pick a fighter with the hero rune mark in your warband to gain a trait and note them in your quest log. This fighter is now on a quest to find out if they can gain a new trait. While embarked upon this quest, in step 4 of a campaign battle's aftermath, you can complete the quest. If an enemy fighter with a hero rune mark was taken down in battle by an attack made by or used by this fighter that's noted. So if your guy in the quest kills an enemy hero, then he's going to get something. When you complete this quest, you can give the fighter 1 of the heroic traits from the universal heroic traits below. So basically, as soon as that guy kills another hero, you can give them a heroic trait. They level up and gain a renown for free. Actually, it doesn't even say they gain a renown. It just says you can give one of the heroic traits from the universal heroic traits below. So you don't even have to gain the renown, because you can lose renown and keep your traits. You just learn a trait, and then the same as the other universal ones. Secure an ally. So this is how you go get an ally to recruit one. Explore the Gnarlwood. Hunt a beast to gain a monster. Fight for glory. And explore the Gnarlwood. All right, and then the quest battle plans. Break its spirit. That's how you get the monster, which is cool. You have to go fight it and break its spirit. We got chaos ones, become a champion of chaos, and this is where you're going to get the additional cool heroic traits. So like, if you are a chaos hero, you can get merciless killer. Basically, once per battle, this fighter can use this heroic trait to make a bonus attack action. That's like a free one. Sharpen your teeth. After each melee attack made by this fighter that targets an enemy within 1, if they weren't taken down, they get D3 extra damage points. Unnatural vitality, they get +5 wounds. So all kinds of cool stuff for chaos people. Also items, that gifts the dark gods. They can find chaos weapons. They get their own special quest battle plan if they're going to desecrate the land. And then they get an encampment location, a chaotic nexus. So if you manage to do the Fell Ritual, I think you create the chaotic nexus and you can immediately move into it. Add 1 to renown rolls you make for fighters with the hero key mark. In addition, in step 5 of the aftermath sequence, you can pick a fighter from your warband and send them forth to reap spoils, and then roll on the table below. You get a chaos. You get special artifacts that are your own boons, and it's 1150 and +3 rep if you do it. Yeah. So desecrate the land. While embarked on this quest, you must keep track of the blood spilled by your warband with a blood score. In each campaign battle, add 1 to the blood score for each enemy fighter taken down by a fighter from your warband. While your blood score total is 8 or more, you can fight battles using the Fell Ritual Quest battle plan. If you do so and you win the battle, then you immediately move into the Chaotic Nexus. You don't need to spend any glory to do so. So you just go on the quest, kill 8 guys, and then do the Fell Ritual. Order quest. Lost treasures of the Order. You can try and find their special treasures. So things like the Gromeral Plate. Subtract 1 from the damage points allocated by each hit and critical hit. Or become a Guardian of the Order, where you can have Holy Might, add 1 to damage points allocated by each hit and critical hit by melee attacks, or Well of Strength. Once per battle at the start of the activation, remove 2d6 damage points from your fighter. You can establish trade routes. This is how you move into a trade route. So this is what you're basically trying to do. It's the Cities of Sigmar thing. You're just trying to Hudson's Bay Company your way through this. It allows you to send forth merchants to try and find Order lesser artifacts like Bugman 6X or a Claw of Urzricht. And then Death Quest, Treasures of the Glaive. So you can find like a Thirsting Blade or a Ring of Shadows where you're not visible if you're outside of 12. Or become a Lord of Death where you're immortal. Don't make injury rolls for this fighter. He can never die. I love that one. What Lies Below. And you can haunt a place basically, and then that moves into your special encampment. And Destruction Quest, the Treasures of Gorka Morka, a Gristle Grinder. Add 3 damage points allocated by each hit and critical hit for melee attacks. Holy crap. Just +3 damage. And then your heroic traits, things like Dead Sneaky. Each time this fighter activates, you can use this heroic trait to make a bonus move action if there's nobody within 12 of you and visible. And then finally, you've got the Burst the Dam. You're trying to turn into a proper bog. You basically flood a spot so you can live in the swamp. That's where destruction guys like to live. All right, and there's 2 campaign arcs in here. They're designed to be around the Horns of Hashut and the Rotmire, but they're not unique to them. You can do whatever you want. You can play them on any factions you like. And campaign arcs are designed to be a bunch of like around 3 to 5 battles that are narratively linked. And so you and your opponent agree, hey, we're going to do this campaign arc together. This is going to be the story we're going to tell. And you're still doing your own quests within it. This is just bonus material, basically, that allows you to not procedurally generate missions while you're doing your quest. So the Path for Ventilax is for 2 players. The Chotek Valley is for, I think it's 3 to 4 players. It's for 4 players. So you have like a Triumphant Treachery one and you have like a 2-player one. The Path to Ventilax, you're basically looking for a map to find the ship. And then the other one, the Chotek Valley, you find the ship and you're fighting over it. And then because the cards could get lost or something, and I assume this is going to get sold separately probably at some point for your existing Warcry players, and we're going to grab the starter set, all the battle plan generator cards are in here. So deployments, your victory conditions, and your twists. Now, the terrain cards you'll notice aren't in here, but that's probably because they're tied to the terrain that comes in the box set. And I imagine that there's going to be terrain packs for the game that each come with their own terrain cards. And then you got your warband roster and your encampments, and a tournament roster for playing in tournaments. And that's it. The new core rulebook for Warcry from the Heart of Ghur. So I'm also going to be reviewing the new Warband Tome, which is for Rot and Ruin, the Rotmar Creed, and the Horns of Hashut, which will give you some insight into how the new warbands work. So what do I think? I'm excited that they took a look at Warcry. First of all, they've been dynamically updating it since it came out with some things that just didn't really work. And I feel like in the beginning, Warcry was kind of designed with these 8 warbands in mind. And there's 2 separate design processes. They designed the box, and all of the box campaigns, or all the box stuff, like the Chaos factions that came in the original core box, and the expansions like the Corvus Cabal, the Unmade, and stuff like that, they were all fairly well internally balanced against each other. But then they were like, well, we want to be able to have people use all the Age of Sigmar models, so let's make these card packs. And those maybe weren't so well balanced against the original 8 warbands that were in that box set. They're pretty well balanced against each other, but not necessarily internally balanced. So that's the next thing. They've gone and basically taken the game and given it a total like once over to try and flatten everything and balance them all against each other. And they looked at it and said, well, where was there not enough meat on the bone? Obviously, that was the narrative section, because when you're playing a skirmish game, what you're playing for is as important as how the game plays. And the game played very competently. They wrote a great core system. The difference, I think, was that you need me to come back and play it again and again and again and again and again, right? Tetris is an incredible game. But if it wasn't for the high score and lines thing on the right-hand corner, I probably would stop playing it after like half an hour. You're chasing a reason to keep playing. You're playing for that quest to get a high score. You're playing for that quest to do like whatever. Being mechanically sound isn't necessarily as engaging long term as having some type of high score to chase, some type of story, some type of like victory or overall goal that you're going after. And I feel like that in and of itself is going to be a massive improvement to this new edition of Warcry. So I'm excited. I like that I can play the quests procedurally generated, or I can use these bespoke sort of story ones. I like the fact that there's a lost starship full of alien space lizards in the middle of a giant woods. I feel like that's changing the location was also really important because it opened it up to, you know, all of the warbands kind of making sense being there. And I'm pumped to paint these dark fantasy models. The Warcry miniatures are some of the coolest miniatures Games Workshop's made in years. The Unmade are some of the weirdest, coolest Citadel miniatures I think ever made, ever, for any reason. And I want more compelling content to give me excuses to paint these cool, dark, #28 fantasy models. And have good guys go and fight them too, and have bad guys and tell some stories in the Raw. So, big thanks for watching. You can check out my review of Rot and Ruin. Talks how Mash. Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that video. There are tons of other games already recorded for you to watch. Click over to my channel page if you haven't already, and have a look through the dozens of playlists full of videos. I guarantee you'll discover a game you haven't seen played before. I put out new videos 7 days a week, and every day is themed to a different genre as I continue to explore the wider world of gaming. Of course, none of that's possible without you, the viewer, so click a like and subscribe if you'd like to stay on top of what's happening here daily. My 2 kids and I are massively grateful to be able to have the flexibility of this job so I can always maximize my time with them. If you want to support me continuing to put out this content, it's only possible because of my amazing backers on Patreon who support the studio, equipment, and model cost, as well as being how I make the bulk of my living. You can also help out by buying a t-shirt through Spreadshirt, a measuring gauge or widget from Deathray Designs, or buying one of my games and supplements like Last Days, Gamma Wolves, and Blaster. As a way of showing my appreciation, patrons get early access to new games and supplements that I write throughout the course of the year. Huge thanks for watching, it really does help out, and happy gaming.